Good morning, everyone. Let us continue the proof of Hahn-Banach theorem. So, what we showed yesterday was that we have a maximal element for the partial order set that we defined, and then we want to prove that for this maximal element, the subspace Z that we get that is equal to V. So we were doing this step 2. Let Z comma F be a maximal element of the claim is Z equal to V. So suppose Z is a proper subspace of V, and let X naught belongs to V and X naught not in Z. Now consider this subspace Y is equal to X plus T X naught, where X belongs to Z and T is a real number. So we are looking at the subspace generated by this Z and the point X naught, which is not in Z. So Z becomes a proper subspace of this Y. Now we will show that we can extend this linear functional f to Y, satisfying that it will be dominated by that P. So we will define let's call H belonging to Y prime such that this Y comma H, this is in the partial order set P. So what we do is, and this H is an extension of this F, and H restricted to Z, this is equal to F. If we can do this, then this ZF will be less than YH, because this partial ordering was defined that ZF is less than equal to YH if Z is a subset of Y and this H is a linear extension of F. So we get this, and because Z is properly contained inside Y, so ZF will not be equal to YH. So this is strictly less than this. This will contradict the maximality of ZF. So therefore, our assumption that there exists some X naught which is not in Z, that is not true. So Z will be equal to the whole vector space V. So how to define this H? That is what we have to do. So we define H of any element in Y is of the form x plus t x naught. So this will be equal to hx, but we want h to be an extension of f. So hx should be equal to fx. H of x plus t x naught is fx plus alpha t, where this alpha belonging to R will be suitably chosen. So basically this alpha will be equal to h of x naught. Once you can define what is h at x naught, then you can define h at any point in y. So we have to only see that how to define this h at x naught, which is alpha, such that it becomes it satisfies the property. So basically, what is the property that we want? That h should be less than equal to p, the convex functional that was given. So we want h of x plus t x naught should be less than equal to p of x plus t x naught for every x in Z and for all t in R. So this is equivalent to fx plus alpha t is less than equal to p of x plus tx naught for all x in Z and t in R. So let's write this one. So if t is greater than 0, then 1 is equivalent to so in this case we can write alpha t is less than equal to px plus tx naught minus fx, and then we can divide by t. So alpha is less than equal to p of x plus tx naught minus f of x divided by t. But p we know is positive homogeneous, so this can be written as p of x by t plus x naught minus f of x by t. F is given to be linear, so fx by t is f of x by t, and p of x plus tx naught by t is p of x by t plus x naught. So alpha should be less than equal to this for every x in Z. So this is equivalent to alpha is less than equal to p of let's write x prime plus x naught minus f of x prime for all x prime in Z. So if t is positive, then if we get alpha to be less than equal to this, because if alpha is less than equal to p of x by t plus x naught minus f of x by t, where t is positive, then if I have any x prime in z, then we can write this x prime as t times x prime by t, and then you see that t times x prime is also in z. So because this is true, this will be true, and if this is true for every x prime in z, then uh, x by t is also in z, so this is true. So this will be equivalent to alpha is less than equal to, if we take infimum over p of x prime plus x naught minus f of x prime, where x prime belongs to z. If alpha is less than equal to this infimum, then alpha will be less than equal to this for every x prime. So we would like to have alpha to be less than equal to infimum of this. And if t is less than 0, then 1 is equivalent to so if you see, we have alpha t. So in that case, minus t will be positive. So we can take minus alpha t is bigger than equal to this, and then divide by minus t. So we'll get minus alpha t is bigger than equal to fx minus p of x plus t naught tx naught for all x in z, which will be equivalent to alpha is bigger than equal to f of x by minus t minus p x by minus t minus x naught for every x in z. So this is equivalent to alpha is bigger than equal to f of x prime minus p of x prime minus x naught for all x prime in z. So alpha bigger than equal to, if it is bigger than equal to the supremum of f of x prime minus p of x prime minus x naught, x prime belonging to z, then it will be bigger than equal to all for all x prime. So what we want is that if we can choose alpha to be between these two numbers, then my 1 will be satisfied for all t. Of course, t equal to 0 is simply saying that fx is less than equal to px, which is true. So this 1 will be satisfied if alpha is chosen so that alpha is less than equal to infimum of p of x plus x naught minus f of x belonging to z, and bigger than equal to supremum of f of x minus P of x minus x naught, x belonging to Z. Now, how do we know that this is true? If my left hand side, this supremum, is less than equal to this infimum, then we can choose alpha between. If this one is bigger than infimum, then we cannot find any alpha satisfying this. So what we need is that this supremum should be less than equal to this infimum. So if we have any x and y belonging to Z, we have f of x plus f of y. This is equal to f of x plus y because f is linear, and f of anything is less than equal to p. So this is less than equal to p of x plus y. And this is the same thing as p of, we have x plus x naught plus y minus x naught. Right, so x plus y is same as x plus x naught plus y minus y naught, y minus x naught. And because p is subadditive, so this is less than equal to p of x plus x naught plus p of y minus x naught. So this implies, if we look at f of x minus p of, sorry, f of y f of y minus p of y minus x naught, this is less than equal to p of x plus x naught minus f of x. This is true for every x and y in Z. So therefore, by taking the infimum of the right hand side and supremum of the left hand side, we'll get this. So this implies this is true for all x, y in Z. So therefore, supremum of f of y minus p of y minus x naught y in Z, this is less than equal to infimum of x in Z. So hence, we can choose alpha satisfying 1. So we are done. Right. Of course, you see that this choice of alpha need not be unique. If the supremum is strictly less than the infimum, then there will be infinitely many choice of alpha, and therefore uh, this choice of this extension is again not unique. So you can have many different extension to a bigger subspace, bigger space. Okay, so now let's write this for non-linear space. So again, this is called Han-Banach extension theorem. So let V be a nonlinear space over R. So we are still considering only real nonlinear space, real vector space, and let W be a subspace, be a subspace of V, and let G belongs to W star. So now, because we have nonlinear space, we can talk about the dual of the nonlinear space. So G belonging to W star, recall that this means that is G W to R is a continuous linear map. So we have any continuous linear functional on W, then this can be extended to whole of V. So then there exists F in V star such that F restricted to W is same as G, and also norm of F is same as norm of G. So we get an extension F which is also continuous linear map such that norm of F is same as norm of G. So this is the theorem. Of course, when we take this norm of G, this is for this space W star we are taking, and here this is a bounded linear functional on V, so this is in V star. So we will just apply the previous theorem to this. So what we have is because G is a continuous linear map, so since G is a bounded linear map, functional. What do we know? G of x, if we write, this is less than equal to norm G times norm x. This is true for all x belonging to W. This is a bounded linear functional on W.
So norm of Gx.
No, Gx is what? Gx is a real number, right?
Okay, so we're taking like normal.
So this will be actually mod of Gx is
Mod.
less than equal to. So Gx is also less than equal to, right? So in fact, we know that Gx is less than equal to this and greater than equal to minus of this, right? So again, because this is
Yes,
Gx,
sir.
Gx is a real number, right? So why I am writing like this? Because in the previous theorem, we wanted to have that g of x is less than equal to some p of x, right? So we will put this as p of x. So let p of x is equal to norm g times norm x. So then p is a convex functional on V. So I mean this P of X I can define for any X belonging to V. So P of X is norm G times norm X. What you have to verify simply that P of X plus Y is less than equal to Px plus Py. So that is because norm of X plus Y is less than equal to norm X plus norm Y. And P of T times X, if T is a positive real number, then we get norm G times norm of Tx, and norm of Tx is equal to T times norm X if T is positive. So therefore, this will satisfy both the properties of convex functional. And we get that this mod of Gx is less than equal to, say G of X is less than equal to P of X. So we get something. So therefore, we have G belonging to W prime. So in the previous theorem, if we had a subspace and we have a linear functional on that subspace, G is a linear functional on W, and G of X is less than equal to P of X for all X in W. So if this is satisfied, then the previous theorem says by the previous theorem, Harmonic theorem, we know that there exists some F belonging to V prime such that F restricted to W is G and Fx is less than equal to Px for all X in V. So now we have to see that this will imply that F is a bounded linear functional. So how do we get that F is bounded linear functional? This is only saying that we have a linear functional which is an extension of G, and Fx is less than equal to P of X. So what does this imply? Fx less than equal to Px for all X in V. This implies Fx is less than equal to, Px was defined to be equal to norm G times norm X for all X in V. And if Fx is less than equal to norm G times norm X, then if we look at F of minus X, this also implies for any X in V, if we look at minus of Fx, that is same as F of minus X, and F of minus X will be less than equal to norm G times norm of minus X. Because norm of minus X is same as norm of X, so that is norm G times norm X. So Fx is less than equal to norm G times norm X, and also minus Fx is less than equal to norm G times norm X. So these two implies that mod Fx is less than equal to norm G times norm X for all X in V. And this implies that F is in V star, and also this says that norm F is less than equal to norm G. Is it okay? So you see, for linear functional, if we get fx is less than a linear functional on a real normed linear space, if we get fx is less than equal to some constant times norm x for every x, then that is enough to say that it is a bounded linear functional, because that will imply this mod fx is less than equal to this, like we proved. So norm f is less than equal to norm g, but we have that g is same as the f restricted to w. So this implies that norm g has to be less than equal to norm f. So therefore, norm f and norm g must be equal. So we have proved everything, that we get a bounded linear functional on v, which restricted to w is equal to the given bounded linear functional g on w, and norm of f is equal to norm of g. So this completes the proof. Now we will, any question on this?
Sir, why can't we take the field to be complex number? Like where there is ptx is equal to tpx, we can take p of tx is equal to absolute value of t times px, and then we can.
No, so see, the thing is that if you have a complex vector space, then these things are complex numbers, right? So this, I mean, the previous theorem that we had, let me. So this was the theorem, right? The Hahn-Banach extension theorem. It says that if V is a vector space and P is a convex functional, so something we had, and we have G is a linear functional on subspace W, Gx is less than equal to P of x for every x in W, right? So first of all, what do you mean by this if this is a complex vector space? Does it make sense? In that case, gx and px are complex numbers, right? So there's no like comparison on complex number. There's no ordering, right? So directly
Yes, sir.
you cannot talk about this theorem. You have to state some other theorem, right? This doesn't make sense. This gx is less than equal to px. This will not make sense. But what we are going to show is that this extension theorem that I mentioned, uh, for norm linear space, what we are saying is that if we have any norm linear space over R and G is a bounded linear functional on subspace W, then this can be extended to a bounded linear functional on the whole space V, which is an extension of this G, and norm of F is equal to norm G. Of course, this theorem makes sense for complex also, right? So I can say that here there is a complex nonlinear space, W is a subspace, and G is a continuous linear functional. And then can we say that there exists a bounded linear functional f on V, which is extension of G and norm f equal to norm G? That perfectly makes sense. And in fact, we will prove that that is also true, right? So, so let's see how to prove this, but we cannot like use this previous theorem, right? Directly for the complex vector space, right? So let's see how to get the complex version. So let me write this theorem. Before doing this theorem, let's write a lemma. So let now V be a non-linear space over the field of complex number. So we have a non-linear space over C, and let F be a continuous linear functional. Let F from V to C be bounded linear functional. So here we have F is a linear map from this vector space to C. So if I have any x in V, fx is a complex number. So we can write the real and imaginary part of this. So let f is equal to g plus ih, where g and h are real valued linear functionals. So basically, we are just defining g of x to be the real part of f of x, and the h of x is the imaginary part. So that is g of x is real part of fx, and h of x is imaginary part of f of x. Of course, you see, if f is a linear map, then this g and h will also be linear. So we get now a linear functional from V to R, right? So then we can write this f of x as gx minus iota times g of ix. So that is, we are saying that this h of x can be written as minus iota times g of ix. So what we are saying is that if we have any bounded linear map from V to C, then we can write this in terms of only the real part. So f of x can be written as g of x minus iota times iota x. So this means that this h of x, we are claiming that that is equal to minus g of iota x for all x in V. So this is true for all x in V, and norm of f is same as norm of g. So let us prove this. So we have fx is equal to gx plus igx. Fx is equal to gx plus I times hx. This is true for all x in V. Now, since f is a linear map, since f v to c is linear, suppose I write f of iota times x, this will be equal to iota times f of x. Right? This is by the linearity. F of iota x is equal to iota times f of x. So this will imply, first of all, f of iota x is equal to g of iota x plus iota times h of iota x equal to, what is iota times fx? This is equal to iota times gx minus hx. By multiplying this fx equal to gx plus iota hx, we get minus hx plus iota times gx. And this g and h are real valued. So therefore, this will imply hx is equal to minus g times iota x and gx is equal to h times iota x. Of course, these two are equivalent. Like if you have hx equal to minus g times iota x, then h of iota x will be minus g times g of minus g of minus x, and because g is linear, that will be equal to g of x. So we get that h of x can be written as minus g times iota x. So therefore, this fx is equal to gx minus iota times g iota x. So this is one thing that we wanted, and we have to see that norm of f is same as norm of g. So for that, now let f of x we can write as mod of f of x times e to the I theta for some theta belonging to 0 to 2 pi. Right, we write in the polar coordinate. So fx equal to, of course, this theta also or depends on your x. So for a given x, we can write like this, and this will imply, maybe I'll write here theta of x. So then mod of fx is equal to e to the minus iota theta x times fx, which is equal to f of e to the minus iota theta times x, because f is linear, so any scalar times fx is equal to f of this, and what can we say about f of this? This is equal to g of e to the minus iota theta times x. Why is this? So this is because, you see, what is f? f is g of f of x is g of x plus iota times h of x, right? So f has a real part and imaginary part. So, but here I am saying that this is only equal to real part of this. So this is because this f of e to the minus iota theta times x, this is equal to mod of f of x, that is the left hand side, which is a real number, right? So it has no imaginary part. So the imaginary part will be equal to 0. We can write this as g of this plus iota times h of this same thing. But h of that, the imaginary part has to be 0 because this is a real number. So mod fx is equal to g of this. So what does this imply? Mod of f of x is less than equal to, now g of anything is less than equal to norm g times norm of this e to the minus iota theta times x. But this e to the minus iota theta, this is of mod 1. So this is equal to norm g times norm x. So this implies this is true for all x in V. So this implies this norm of f is less than equal to norm of g. So we get norm of f is less than equal to norm of g, but we have to prove the equality. So if we look at mod of fx square, this is equal to mod of gx square plus mod of hx square. This is because fx is the complex number gx plus iota hx. So this we get, and this will imply that mod of gx is always less than equal to mod of fx. Or simply this is just the real part of this complex number fx. So mod of real part of any complex number is less than equal to mod of z. So this is true for every x. And mod fx is less than equal to norm f times norm x. So this implies norm of g is also less than equal to norm f. So therefore, norm f is same as norm of g. Right. So this lemma says that if we have any complex valued linear functional on a complex nonlinear space, then the norm of this f is same as the norm of the real part of f. Right. So f can be written as g plus ih. So norm of f is same as norm of g, and f can be written in terms of the real part as gx minus iota g iota x. So now we'll write the Hahn-Banach extension theorem for complex nonlinear space. Hahn-Banach theorem for complex nonlinear space. So let V be a nonlinear space over C, and let W be a subspace of V and let G belongs to W star. So when we have complex nonlinear space, when I say G in W star, that means G from W to C. So it is G from W to C is bounded linear. So we have a bounded linear functional on W. So then there exists F in V star such that F restricted to W is G and norm of F is same as norm of G. So this theorem is same as the theorem for the real norm-linear space. So it does not matter whether you take norm-linear space over R or C. We have this extension theorem that if we have any bounded linear map, bounded linear functional on a subspace, then it can be extended to a bounded linear functional on the whole space without changing the norm. So how do we prove this? Now with the lemma and the previous theorem, we can easily prove it. So by the previous lemma, this G of X is equal to some H of X minus iota times H of iota X where this H is the real part of G. Right. So any complex and any linear functional to the complex field can be written as the real part minus iota times that H of iota X. So this is true for every X in W. So now what we'll do, so considering this V as a norm-linear space over R, see any norm-linear space over C is also a norm-linear space over R, because when we say that it is a vector space over C, you can restrict
So I think you're muted.
हेलो सर, आपकी आवाज सुनाई नहीं दे रही है।
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think my other device I have lost connection, so I'll just use this one. And you can see the screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what I said is that this h can be extended to a bounded linear functional h tilde from V to R, such that norm of h tilde is same as norm of h. So now what we do, we have to define f, define f from V to C by f of x is equal to h tilde of x minus iota times h tilde of iota x. Right. So basically, what we are doing is we are making this h tilde to be the real part of the function f that we require. So we know that the imaginary part has to be the minus iota times h tilde of iota x. So we define a function f to be equal to f of x equal to h tilde x minus iota times h tilde of iota x for all x in C. So then if we look at f of x plus y, this you can check is fx plus fy. This is easy to check. because H tilde is the real linear. So we get this. Also, if I write f of alpha x, this is equal to alpha times fx for all x, for all x in V and for all alpha belonging to R. But we cannot say here directly for alpha in complex also, because this H tilde is a real linear map. So H tilde of alpha times x is alpha times H tilde of x if alpha is a real number. But of course, H tilde of alpha x, we cannot say that that is alpha times H tilde of x if alpha is a complex number, because in fact H tilde is always real valued, so we cannot say that. So we get this only for real. But what about f of iota x? Let's look at what is f of iota x. This is equal to H tilde of iota x minus iota times H tilde of, if I put iota x instead of x, then I'll get H tilde of minus x. And this is same as iota times. So H tilde is the real linear. So this is iota times H tilde of x minus iota H tilde of iota x, which is same as iota times f of x. So f of iota x is equal to iota times fx. This is true for every x in V. So once we get that f is real linear and f of iota x is equal to iota times fx, so therefore f of any lambda times x will be equal to lambda times fx for all lambda belonging to C. Is it okay?
Sir, when you have written h tilde iota x is iota h tilde x, like why would that be true? Like because h tilde was linear over the vector space V, considering it
No,
over
I did
R.
not write that. I did not write h tilde of iota x as this. So
Oh, okay.
maybe I should write one more line. So I am writing this as h tilde of iota x minus, this will become plus iota h tilde of x. Is it okay? Because h tilde of minus x is minus of h tilde of x, right? Now we take iota common and then write this as h tilde of x plus, so that will become minus iota h tilde of iota x.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to be careful because this h tilde is only real linear. So we write like this. Is it okay?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Just 1 minute. Yeah, so let me just finish this proof. So therefore, we get that f is the linear. So therefore, f belongs to V prime. Also, what is norm of f? Norm of f will be equal to norm of h tilde. This is by again the previous lemma. and the norm of H tilde is equal to norm of H. So therefore, this is equal to norm of H. This is by that Hahn-Banach extension, the way we did. And norm of H is again equal to norm of G, because H was the real part of this G. So this is again by the lemma. So what we got is norm of F is equal to norm of G. Hence we are done. So this proves the Hahn-Banach extension theorem for complex nonlinear space also. In the next class, I'll do some applications of these theorems. Okay, thank you.